Welcome, everybody, to Policy Committee meeting. It is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021. It is 6:46. We are in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. Present, we have me, Ms. Bishop, Ms. Ziem, I see, and Ms. Johnson, our alternate, is here. Mr. Guarino is not here, and also present is Mr. Parker. We have we have 4 policies to review. Two of them are reviewed old policies that we just need to update. We have some updates on 2 policies after that. So I'm thinking we could probably get this done in about 45 minutes. So we're ready to go. So the first policy that we're going to be reviewing is policy EBBD, indoor air quality. Mr. Parker, do you want to speak to this?
Well, there are no changes to this. This and that.
Oh, you need to put your mic on. Sorry.
I forgot I'm talking to all my fans there. The first 2 policies mirrored word for word.
Yes.
The New Hampshire School Boards Association recommendations. So they didn't need to be updated in any way.
So I make a motion that we accept policy EBBD as presented.
So moved, or seconded.
And the same holds true for policy
Are we gonna
JL.
vote- Excuse me, or are we going to vote for them one at a time?
Yeah, I am taking notes. Okay. On the motion to accept EBBD as presented, Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Ziem?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, the second policy to review is JLCE, Emergency Care and First Aid, which Mr. Parker is also saying is word for word from the...
And it's up to date, and there's no additions that need to be made on it. It's clear as is, and
Okay.
still stands, still relevant.
I make a motion that we accept policy JLCE as presented.
Seconded. On the motion to accept JLCE, Ms. Ziem,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. Are you taking notes for me?
Yes.
Oh, I was taking notes. I was going to transfer them over after.
Okay.
I don't mind not doing things twice. Okay. Don't threaten me with a good time. The next policy we're going to be reviewing is JKAA, Child Restraint and Seclusion, which I think kind of bumps into the curriculum meeting that you guys just had. Do you want to review this for us, Mr. Parker?
Yes, we added some specificity, what you see in red, to make it in line with the New Hampshire School Boards Association recommendations. So we added just a touch more specificity about what restraints, which in general terms should be the exception and not the rule.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But we do need to have a current policy so that people clearly know who
Yep.
and when, okay, in what circumstances.
Right.
All right. So I won't read it. I mean, it's pretty clear, the stuff that's in red, what we are teasing out. Again, for just to beef up the existing policy. And I think it's very important that, people understand restraint is not used as a punishment
Yes.
for bad behavior.
Right.
All right?
It's safety.
It's safety. No one should be putting their hands on anybody unless someone is in imminent danger. Imminent danger. So I want to be clear on that. I think it's important to say restraint. I'm reading it after I said I wouldn't, but restraint will not be imposed for longer than is necessary.
And reviewed every 15 minutes.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Okay, and each building should have a team of people who should be the go-to, unless you're in a classroom and you have to act to get to have a child go out of the room to protect others. The assistant principal, school nurse, so.
Ms. Seem?
Can you tell me, Mr. Parker, the requirements on the people who are permitted to do these restraints? As my memory recalls, they have specific training that
That's
makes
correct.
them qualified. Is that a day class? Do we know anything about that at all? It would just be
We
kind
can,
of...
I haven't used it here in New Hampshire, but we certainly can, because folks are trained. We have folks in our buildings who are trained, and so it's easy enough to follow up to make sure if retraining, recertification should be happening and get that in place for the fall. So that's easy enough to sort out. Right, and have the principals identify who in their buildings they want to be trained.
Right. That was my only question is, if we wanted to outline, well, I had said this before, but restraint will only be used by trained school staff, but it's my understanding that the trained school staff is outlined in the teacher handbook and in those.
I believe that is correct, but you put it in my mind to double check that.
Okay.
I'll double check that.
Okay. Right, because I know I hold this training from prior employment, and it was a fancy piece of paper I got.
I call that legalese. Very seldom.
I think there was like a sticker on it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand. So I will make a motion that we...
Wait a second.
If you had a question.
I have a
Yeah, Ms. Johnson
question.
had
Well,
some
you can say it
questions.
after I make the motion too, but it's all right.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay, it doesn't matter. You want to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll just put the motion on the table, and then I make a motion that we approve policy JKAA as amended.
Seconded. Discussion.
Thank you. I'm just writing this down, 1 second. Okay, so it's going to be in the teacher's handbook the outline of who's trained to be able to restrain the
I
student?
believe it's there. I have not looked at it specifically, and that's what I was just saying to Ms. Bishop. I will double check that, and if it is in fact not there, we will place it there. I will direct the principals to make sure that it is there for each of the building handbooks, which are usually worked on during the course of the summer. They're updated, so we can have it in place come the fall.
Okay, because in the handbook, will it be saying the teachers' names or just?
No.
Okay,
no.
I would like to kind of amend this policy and have the attached to this policy, who is allowed, what staff would be allowed to restrain a child. So it's attached to the policy, so everybody can review that into the policy. So I'll amend the motion to have a copy of the outlined information from the teacher's handbook on who can restrain a child.
Wouldn't that require changing every year then? Because I would assume that would change from year to year. I mean, I would think so.
It may, because different people in different buildings, not necessarily the same ones, but we can make it more uniform,
Can't hear him? Okay.
For instance, assistant principals,
Yep.
perhaps the school nurse, or so we can identify that, okay? And so principals have some latitude in who they feel.
Aren't they, excuse me, aren't they, I'm asking?
Sure.
If recollection serves me correctly, and it may not, sometimes my understanding, whether right or wrong, was that the paras frequently also.
That is correct.
So, and it wouldn't be all para educators. It would only be those who have, and I suppose you could make the language, if you wanted it, you could certainly make the language, if you're doing it by title as opposed to individual name, which would mean that you wouldn't have to change it every time.
Or you could say appropriate staff, and that, so appropriate staff could be different next year. If you have more people who are trained, whether it's paras or full-time faculty, teachers, counselors, right? And so that's
School psychologists.
psychologists.
Psychologists. It's just so, really, people, if anybody takes a look at this policy, they open it up and they're going to say, well, who can restrain a child? Are they qualified? Are they certified? It just kind of gives anybody, I don't know how many people read the, policy and procedure manual, but there are people that will take a look at this and say, but who can touch the child? Who can restrain the child? And it just gives that little bit more information, because we, the public, are not going to go to the teacher's handbook.
Sure.
We don't have access to that, really.
I think the trained school staff piece is these trainings evolve all the time. So if somebody's trained in 2016, if there's been a second training in 2018, and now it's kind of relabeled as something else, your certification has expired and you have to get the new one. So by just saying the appropriately trained school staff, you're kind of encompassing, so we don't have to come back to this every year or two when the training itself changes and is renamed.
Well, on something of this importance that hasn't been updated since 2015.
Right.
Okay, this might be a policy that you might want to revisit every couple of years, because things might change on how we deal with students that have behavior, because new guidelines re-evolve. And so it might say, at that point, maybe 2-3 years, it might only say the school psychologists could be ones that can work with these students, because I called up a friend of mine who's an educational advocate, and I said to her, okay, I need some information on this. Who has the right to restrain a child? And she had said to me, school psychologists, and she went down the list of people.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that anybody, especially a parent that has a child that might have emotional problems, and they did go in to look at the policy, they see who are the ones that can work with these students in that time of need.
We can finagle the language, we can add language. It doesn't have to be extensive. I mean,
Right.
we can do that.
I knew you're so great to work with,
How
Mr.
do you
Parker.
like this, Paula? So restraint will only be used by trained school staff as defined appropriately in the teacher's handbook. And then it can go into it can evolve without us needing to, because I would hate for the evolution of the training to change, the policy not to be in line, and then us having kind of that murky
But you
ground.
need to, if it's in the teacher's handbook is restricted to teachers, I would assume.
I'm
So
going-
if
I'm
it were
going to
parent
verify.
and staff.
I'm going to
Okay.
verify that, because I don't think it has to be an either or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be an and.
And can I, as Paula's questions evoke other, can I just ask you, if indeed this says that they can't restrain the child for more than X minutes or whatever the restriction happens to be, if they violate that restriction, then does that mean that the parent has a right to come back and bring suit, or and what happens to if a employee is found being remiss about enforcing it to the letter of our policy, then is there would there be some ramification? How much of that would go in this? Is
That
something
wouldn't
you want to
necessarily,
research?
that would go in here. I would not recommend putting that in there. If somebody treats any child improperly, that's automatically an administrative process to investigate and to assess whatever penalty or whatever needs to be done. So we will communicate. So that's per policy anyway.
And I'm not, I wouldn't want anybody to think that I'm suggesting that I think this happens all the time. I certainly don't. If I had known it ever happened, I would have been, in that case, like Mrs. Johnson, I probably would have been I would have been a little vocal. So I'm certainly not suggesting that. I'm just saying that in thinking it through the way she obviously has, it caused me to, and I guess the natural thing that came to mind was all the stuff that's going on with the police now. I mean, they have to record everything they do so that they can prove that they didn't violate.
Sure.
And so
And that's just the nature of, the nature of.
much more serious, but
Yeah, and hate to have a policy like this, but I've been in situations where it had to be
You have
used.
to have
Again, it's the exception and not the rule, right? We should never have multiple instances on
Yep.
a regular basis of restraining.
Yep.
So,
It makes me think, though, that when we have an ADHD, and that my daughter she has custody of him. And he does have, I don't know that it's happened, but I do know he's come perilously close.
sure.
And so I'm sure that with some of those kids, it's probably more likely to happen. Although sometimes it's not, it can go either way, obviously, but I know in his case, he doesn't process well. His processing, he was born with problems, medical problems, so
Usually, if we know if there's a pre-existing medical or emotional issue, where sometimes something a little above and beyond for kids who don't have a history, we know in advance. And we know in advance if there are any special procedures that need to take place, because usually those procedures are already in place.
Yeah.
Right, because they didn't just happen, let's say, by the time you got to high school. Right, and so that is helpful too. So whether or not you can have a 504 and IEP, there's a history.
Right.
There's a history and steps about this is what we recommend, right? And so that any school is not flying
Right.
blind.
And this isn't, I mean, these aren't teachers that are meeting the kid for the first time that day. This is a teacher or a para who knows the student really well and can probably pick up on their cues pretty
Yes.
fast. And when Johnny starts wiggling his leg, that we need to start getting him maybe a snack or
Right,
go
and
for a walk.
there's a lot of time and energy, for instance, in those little codes,
Right.
those little signals.
Yep.
And paras are generally ground zero because they travel
Yep.
with the child, for the most part.
Right.
And so it's little things like that, like in summer planning, if somebody's new to the building, usually those discussions will be had
Yeah.
with all the relevant parties at the table.
Yep.
Right.
They're their little guardians.
One quick question. What happens, and I don't think it's in here, what happens if they cannot restrain the child, that he or she is just so out of control? What do they do?
Usually help is summoned, all right? In that instance, you do what is necessary for that child's safety and the safety of others. So if that means a couple of people have to they're that out of control, you summon help and you get them to a place as quickly as possible. Or if you can't do that, I've been in situations where it was a classroom setting, everybody else left.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Everybody else, we moved them someplace else.
Yep.
And so we could just stay with that one individual. So that's what we did. If we don't have enough help to actually remove the threat or the person who's harming themselves or others in any sort of a way, we clear the area.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I've been in situations like that at the school, where you just take the teacher and the students all leave the classroom, and then the para and the student typically stay in there, talk it through, and then walk them back over to their more safe zone.
Like I said, I have an advocate that I was speaking to about this policy, because I think this is a very important policy. I think that we need to make sure it's worded correctly, because of the fact the situation that could start off as a little tiny situation could blow up from a mountain, a molehill into a mountain into a molehill, whichever way it goes. I'm tired tonight. I didn't work today. And that's the one thing we want to avoid, is a huge situation. And the students in the classroom who's not having the meltdown are now all upset. And we don't want that to happen, for them to be afraid and to see something like this, their classmate.
And so, yes, and usually there would be some sort of follow-up. not only from the person who had to be removed, what was going on, where you had to go to that extreme, but also there would be follow-up with everybody else.
Yeah,
With
a little
the Marines.
debriefing.
A little debriefing, if not that same day, could be the next day, okay? Or it could be with an individual counselor, you know? So, I mean, the building would make those determinations depending on how kids are feeling. Sometimes kids are feeling fine, they got it, because they understood the circumstance, so they didn't feel, you know, but it's always good to touch base, even if briefly, because you don't necessarily want to dwell on an issue. But
Right.
there's that kind of disruption if you don't have to. So,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
So it sounds like we would like the amendment to just be specific about what the training is.
What the training is, or identify certain roles who can actually do restraints. I just want to be clear.
Yes, who can do the restraints? Absolutely, thank
So
you.
I have an attachment to who can restrain a child, and I'll work with the principals on that, just to get their input, because they might have teams in place already, you know, but, you know, so,
I think they do.
yeah, they do.
We'll just get it written down. Do we want to hold off on voting on this then, until we get that information?
Could we?
Sure,
Okay,
sure.
but we're going to table this.
Okay.
I think we have,
Well, we jumped over KF, didn't we? Community use of school
we have to,
facilities.
well, we have to vote on the motion to table this. No, we don't. Do we?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to vote on tabling it.
Who's going to,
So you
I'll
made
make
the
a motion to table.
I'll second it.
Well, I suppose
I would like this to be on our next policy committee, though. I think,
I could just remove my motion too, couldn't I? Remember we've
Well,
done that
it's just,
before.
it's just as clean as to do it this way.
Okay.
I wrote it down already.
okay. That helps with planning, doesn't it?
I'm getting to be like you, yeah.
So on the motion to table, Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop votes yes, and Ms. Seem.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we want to make a motion to approve policy KF, community use of school facilities.
Yes, that was a minor change. Just added some language on that last page.
Oh, I second your motion. But Mr. Parker, you can speak to the sentence change.
Well, it's just, I think it was just a nice addition that ours didn't have. Just, you know, approval may be denied for space or, and we never specified if we let somebody use our facilities, you know, and they did something untoward. This is just making it clear that you
Yep.
won't be allowed to use it again.
Yep.
Essentially. And so,
Okay.
And that's a good one, because if they violate any of the school board policies, they can be denied access.
So on the motion to approve policy KF, Ms. Seem,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop votes yes, and Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, that's all of our policies. We're going to win for best committee.
I don't know about that.
I have a question, and this is just an outside question.
Yeah.
On the policy, I couldn't find anything. Do we have a school policy dress code for faculty?
other than in general, you know,
I don't think so.
the professional attire, I don't believe we do.
Right, there's no
Okay.
policy, but it's in there.
Okay, so that's just for professional attire. How do we describe professional attire? How do we describe that?
I knew that was coming, Mrs. Johnson.
What? You knew
I
that?
knew that was coming. I bet you did too.
Well, you know, somebody that's dressed professional attire, I mean, it depends. I wear suits and ties. For me, that's professional attire. But you're neat, you're presentable, all right, and you're not making anybody else possibly uncomfortable with what you are or are not wearing. So-
And I'm assuming if a teacher was possibly dressing in a way that's making other people uncomfortable, the principal would be the first person to address that.
They would. The principal or the assistant principal would be the first person to address that.
So here comes Mrs. Johnson again with another question. What's, I guess, define uncomfortable? Because to me, professional attire would be either suit and tie, a professional shirt, casual professional, a blazer with slacks or pants, not to me blue jeans or anything, because to me, my thinking, old way of thinking, business, you don't want to put yourself at the same level as the students because you want to be friends with them, but not a best friend with them. You want to be able to work with them, but not, same thing like with a parent. You're the authority, and you want them to look at you at that point.
I believe some of our teachers do wear dungarees. I believe they do. And so especially like my kids go to private school, they have what they call a dress down day. And they usually do it on a Friday, but you could do it any time. And on the dress down day, the teachers could wear, more casual.
And that's fine. But I'm just trying to find out because, again, questions were asked of me. Can they wear shorts and T-shirts to class, to teachers? Because, if we're professional, we need to dress professional because it's the way you're perceived and it's the way the students perceive you as in the classroom. That's how I look at it all.
I think we could probably check with HR and see what the,
I'm happy to do that. But I have not, if there is a policy, I have not read it or seen it and have a hands. I'll see what's on the books.
It would be interesting if, and I'm putting work on you, for which I apologize. I'm sure you're very busy right now. But it would be interesting if we don't have a policy, does state have a policy? Do they have, because I think state has suggested policies or policies that they sample policies kind of, and if they do, then the question would be, do they have a dress policy in that? So if you would just go that another step.
and I'll let you guys email about it. Paula, if you have questions or comments or concerns about what Mr. Parker presents to you as to what the answer is, if it needs to come into policy, we can readdress it then. But I think right now, the principals probably have a handle on it, and we just need to know what the steps are. So,
Okay. And one more question, and we'll be out. One more question. Policy GBEA, professional ethics.
Yep.
Number C, educators should guide their students to appreciation practice of principles of democracy. I'd like to see this come to the committee because I'd like to add to that, no politics in the classroom.
What policy is that?
GBEA.
GBEA.
I would respectfully, I believe that there is something somewhere about no politics in the classroom.
Now, I'm trying to,
There is a policy.
Maybe not in that policy, but there is a policy somewhere.
There is.
So I would, again,
It was
ask...
one of the first we reviewed.
I would ask you,
trying to go
Mr.
back and
Parker,
find
if
it
you
all.
would see if you, well, it's
It was,
hard.
we'll chat offline about this.
Here's,
Okay.
yeah, a little bit here, a little bit there, and so you...
Yep.
Yeah.
but I think it also comes underneath this too because it talks about the principles of democracy. And I just want to make sure that politics stay out of the classroom, other than history that is written and how we're teaching it. That we don't have one party or the other in the classrooms, because I think it's, when election time comes, what your belief is your belief, and we shouldn't be bringing it into the classrooms at all. No literature, no nothing. As we know, an election is coming up in November. And
I
need
think
to
we would,
keep it
I think we
clean.
would get pushback from probably some of the social studies teachers who are teaching the critical thinking and how to come to these decisions. But I think you guys are dealing with that in curriculum and evaluation about what is being presented. But we can take a look at that.
I was told...
And I think that was brought up before anyway.
I was told that that is not being taught in the National School District.
No,
what I was
the
told.
critical thinking piece of like how to come up with
Okay, just as
how
long
you
as
make a decision, what kind of research have you done, who have you talked to?
And I wasn't trying to give you a hard time. I just wanted to be sure that I
That's what I was told, too.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable that I was told correctly, and so I just,
No, I believe that's the case.
yes.
And I think we reviewed that policy at the beginning.
Well, and it's interesting because I've had school board members from other districts in the state tell me that they are teaching it. Not only are they teaching it, but they have classes to teach them how to teach it, and they teach it as low as kindergarten. So that was told to me just recently. So if we are teaching it, but I want to say, and I said this to Dr. McKinney, and I will say it to you too, Mr. Parker, when you have 2,000 teachers, you can write policies and you can say, this is our best practice. We respectfully request that you adhere to these policies to the best of your ability. But in the end, 2,000 teachers, they're not, some of them won't even have read these policies, is the truth. And so I don't want the public to think that we are being critical of the majority of our teachers, because I do believe that the majority, I believe Nashua is blessed that in the great majority we have top shelf, we have the best. And people ask me what makes Nashua strong, and I will tell you again and again, it is our teachers. We have a lot of teachers who have the tenure. That's experience, and experience, as you, I'm sure you know, I'm preaching to the choir, and I'm sorry. So I just don't, I would not want the public to think that we're being critical of our teachers, because I don't think that's the case for Mrs. Johnson, for any of us.
No, I'm not being critical. I'm just making sure policies are correct.
Yep.
And that we abide by the policy.
Well, let's do a little research and then see what we dig up, and if it's something that we feel needs to come back here,
Fine with
we
me.
can.
And I want to say, it's a pleasure working with you, Mr. Parker. In person. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
It is, on the motion to adjourn, Ms. Ziem, yes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And Ms. Bishop votes yes. We are adjourned at 7:19.